Good afternoon, everyone. I am Taroub Sleiman, Senior Advisor and Trainer at Dubai Real Estate Institute. DREI is the educational arm of Dubai Land Department, and it is a leading institute in the Middle East and North Africa. DREI provides resources, certification, and professional management, professional development courses and advanced training in cooperation with internationally recognized universities and organizations, with the aim of spreading knowledge and awareness of the latest development in the real estate industry. DREI has recently launched DREI Talks. These are a series of online events where we collaborate with our partners and experts in the market to discuss topics of current interest. Now, today's topic is jointly owned property management, specifically talking about cost control and reserve fund planning. Today with me are two experts, Mr. Waqar Hassan, founder and owner of Ittihad Community Management, and Mr. Alexander Karabet, founder and managing director of Mansions Group of Companies. Hello, sirs.
Hello, everyone.
I am pleased to have you with us. To start off, just to give a introduction, Dubai projects are mostly jointly owned developments, big developments where individual owners or owners of the individual units are responsible for their the inside of their property, but then where they also share the benefits and the rights to enjoy, as well as the responsibility for the common areas, maintaining, managing, and operation. This is exactly where the expertise of community management corporation comes in, and specifically in the area of the management of the funds collected through the service charges. I will leave the floor to, first of all, Mr. Karabet to give us his view on this.
Thank you very much, Taroub. It's a pleasure to be here. And hello, everyone. We're here to discuss a quite important topic, especially nowadays. It's very important to control cost and minimize cost and optimize cost. And we're going to be speaking about the jointly owned properties and buildings and communities, and what costs are associated with the operations of those communities, how those costs can impact your assets, what are the factors that in return impact the cost and operations. And we'll also be discussing a few strategies that you may use as community managers or build owners to control and optimize the cost of running a building or a community. We would like to start. Yes. So we would like to start with a general overview. It's not going to take much time, but for those of us who are not from the industry may want to know what are the operating costs. So these are simply the expenses related to the operation and management of the building. There are a few of them. There are a few main ones we would like to discuss, and I'm not going to go deep into each and every one, but I would like you to pay attention on what the costs are. These are the building insurance. This is something that is related to insuring the common assets, insuring the building and property from all the risks associated with the operations and well-being of the building. That may be the fire, theft, or complete destruction. A second cost cluster is the cleaning services. That includes cleaning of the common areas that are jointly owned by all the stakeholders. Examples could be hallways, lobbies, and other areas. Of course, utilities. Utilities are mainly costs associated with air conditioning, electricity, and water. And sometimes in some buildings, these costs are as high as 45% or 50%, sometimes more than 50% of the overall annual budget. Of course, security. security services are regularly provided to all the jointly owned properties or any other properties. Maintenance is one of the top priorities when we speak about the assets, we speak about the buildings, equipment, and all the mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems. Of course, supplies. So we have various supplies in the buildings to supply for the common areas, gymnasiums, swimming pools, and others. Of course, we speak about the amortization of the capital expenditures, and these are the so-called reserve funds. As managers, we accumulate money in the reserve fund so that if there is any emergency or any unplanned capital expense, we could tap into that reserve fund and finance the expenditure. Another cost item is the property management fee. All the buildings, all the jointly owned buildings are run by professional management teams, and those teams, of course, charge for their services. And the component that we're going to be talking the least is taxes. Fortunately, UAE has very low VAT, only 5%. But here we mean taxes, not just the VAT, but any other government charges and fees. Next slide. What are the objectives of building operation and maintenance? Of course, as owners and as management, we need our buildings to be safe. That's number one. Safety is always a concern. We need our buildings to be fit for use. If an owner investing money into property, they would like to get as much as they pay for. So we are here to make sure we deliver that. Of course, we care about the condition of the building, and we care about the buildings meeting all the statutory requirements, just to avoid fines, just to avoid any other issue associated with the Dubai municipality, for example, or the Dubai Land Department, any other DCD fees and other statutory requirements. Of course, the maintenance work is necessary to protect the value of our assets and make sure that the whole life cycle of our asset is fulfilled 100%. How the costs impact the value of the property. Some say that it doesn't impact, some say it impacts it directly. I believe that the maintenance fees values, the maintenance fees rates have indirect effect on the value of the property. For example, a building with a high service charge may attract high-end buyers and investors, because when an investor or a buyer sees that the building or the owners association or the management spend good amount of money onto the maintenance and operations, a building should be in a good condition. In return, low maintenance fees may point to poor maintenance and planning, and that in return would lead to additional costs related to future corrective or unplanned maintenance. A good example are developers that nowadays advertise lower operating costs, lower service charges for the new development. This may lead potential investor, potential owners to a confusion. And when the community management company comes and take over the building or a community, they suddenly increase the maintenance fees, the service charges. And that is because for the new developments, the main components of the mechanical systems are still under warranty. And that may go for 1, 2, 3 years. And then when the community management company comes, the service charges, the maintenance costs will be normalized and will go to rather increased levels. Another impact that lower than normal operating costs may indicate that the management may not be conducting the scheduled and preventive maintenance of the building. which is of course dangerous. So all the costs, an indication of those costs may impact the value if you look at it correctly. When we speak about what influence the cost in joint film property, there are many factors. I've tried to group those factors into 5 categories. Category number 1 is building characteristic, and if you look at the slide, you will see certain characteristics that all the buildings communities have in Dubai and other places. Second category are the maintenance factors. Factors like poor workmanship, budget constraints on maintenance, poor maintenance management, failure to execute the maintenance at the right time, and so on. Another factors are owner factors. In our case, that would be owners association. The expectation of tenants or owners, how the owners use the property, and how the owners view that property. Was there any vandalism in place and so on? So that all affects the cost. Of course, regulatory and economical factors, changes in taxes, changes in tariffs, price inflation. There are changes in standards, government, Dubai Land Department, Dubai Municipality, and so on. And there are other factors, of course. It's the competences of the management companies, competences of the contractors. There are poor management decisions. There is absence of the automation, for example. There may be absence of the logic sometimes. There are third-party vandalism. You never know what may happen with the building when visitors come to. Absence of the any energy management systems, and of course, effect of the warranty. So these are the determinants. Each one of you may actually name more, I'm sure, but they are the most important ones. That's what we believe are now. If you look at the cost control in general, controlling costs, reducing costs is not easy. It is not easy. There may be conflicts associated with that. And for example, within one organization, different departments may compete on achieving objectives and expectations. And that can create conflicts among the departments. And as a result, it may actually lead to jeopardizing the success in cost control. One of the examples is when within one organization, procurement department may achieve success by purchasing materials at the lowest available cost, but at the same time, maintenance and engineering department, in the battle of minimizing the total cost of operation, would want to have a better quality material, more robust material. So that would create a conflict. So minimizing the total cost of operation by the maintenance department might not involve purchasing the lower cost material. And in fact, it may drive those managers to make a decision towards purchasing higher cost materials. For example, the factors considered by procurement may be delivery time, handling, marginal benefits, or price fluctuation. This is what usually procurement department would look at. As opposed to the maintenance department, they would look at the minimization of the total cost of operation, such as cost of use, the maintenance of those assets, and replacement. For example, maintenance department would want to look at shortening mean time between failures or increasing mean time to repair, which are the very standard factors of the maintenance, in our case, MEP, maintenance, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing services. And of course, reduce downtime. So controlling cost is not easy. It has to be driven from the top, from the management. I'll touch on this in a little while. There are also risks associated with application of low-cost materials or services, if you like. These are the most expensive ones that may be most expensive is environmental risk or injury risk, personnel risk. There are regulatory risks like fines. If you install equipment that is not it does not conform with the standards or with the regulations, you may face a fine. There are also performance risks that will actually drive the cost up, will short the mean time between failure and increase the mean time to repair. So maintenance, of course, loss of revenue, downtime, decreased productivity, these are all really important risks that all the managers need to consider when reducing and controlling costs in the building. What are the steps to success? And these are very generic to start with. We will go into more detailed strategies, but these are very generic to start with. So let's look at where we can begin. Set a vision and direction. Leadership has to be shown from the top of the organization, down to department level managers, down to your site team. Leadership needs to set the expectations across the organization to prevent any disparity. This process starts with establishing a vision, alignment, and clear direction, as well as recognized results. So within your organization, as well as amongst the suppliers and contractors to your project, you have to push your vision and your leadership and try to drive and adopt that vision for driving the cost down or controlling the cost. What you also need to establish a team approach and collaborative metrics. Myself and within our organization, we define team as together everyone achieves more. Managers need to establish cross-functional metrics, make sure everyone clearly understands the expectations, and tie the accountability for metrics to the performance management system. So everybody across the layers of your organization has to work as a team. That's very important. They all need to know the values. They all need to know the objectives. You need to remain diligent. The final step in obtaining the lowest total cost of operation is to create a culture that maintains focus and sustains expectations. We're moving into just maybe a performance or objective-driven organization into organization that has cost control culture. That's very important. That's a very big change in management. There is a very big transformation within the organization. So you can create a structure and systems that promote a proactive approach to maintenance and engineering activities by developing staff competencies, for example, or clearly defining roles and responsibilities. Write them down, push them to your contractors, push them to your management teams, and to all the layers of your organization. Make sure they read it, make sure they understand it. Measure performance of your organization, measure performance of your individuals, managers, and contractors. Provide feedback. Ask your contractors, ask your team members to provide feedback on how this system is functioning, how your decisions impact their everyday operations. Promote focus on quality and precision. Speak about quality. It's very important. Speak about quality every day. There are two things that we very often speak about in our organization is quality and safety. These are two things that are always the main within our company. And ensure adequate facilities and resources. You cannot manage a building with or clean a building with one cleaner. That's simply impossible. So ensure that you have enough personnel and those are qualified. That will help you to control your costs. So let's jump into strategies. And again, there are hundreds of different strategies.
Excuse me, Mr. Karavet, can I just ask a question here? How do you see training of your personnel? How important is that? How would you rate that? To have trained even cleaners, you know, no matter what position they hold. I think training is extremely important.
Absolutely, absolutely. Unfortunately, there are no high degrees in community management, so we have to use resources like DREI resources for. Yeah.
Yes.
So we can And we do training, and I encourage everyone, if there are any managers here, I encourage every manager to run training for their employees themselves in their offices. It's very important. Dedicate 1 hour, 2 hours a month just to run a quick, simple workshop. That's very important.
Even customer service and, you know, simple customer service tricks. And you know, I think sometimes if a janitor smiles at the client, at the user, it makes a difference in the community. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I 100% agree to that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay. No. So let's get back to the cost control strategies. And as I mentioned, there are many strategies in the market. All experienced managers know how to optimize and control the cost. There are just a few here, probably the most important ones, to my view, that I would like to share. Energy. We all know that energy is taking as much as 45-50% of our expenses. So it's quite a lot. And that's why it's actually easy to control and reduce that. If you look at the strategies for the energy cost control, you look at the no-cost strategies and the low-cost strategies and high-cost strategies. And it really depends on how much money you have, how much resources you have at your disposal to throw onto the minimizing those costs. Look at the no-cost strategies. This must be implemented, mandatory. Review current processes, ensure it's executed. Change out light bulbs. Yeah, timely maintain filters. Seal windows and doors. These are basic things, and I'm going down to the site level at the moment, just so you understand how basic it is and that it will help you to control the cost. And low-cost strategies, occupancy sensors or movement sensors, tune up your equipment, calibrate controls, modify cooling regimes, and do minor upgrades. Discuss it with your MEP team, discuss it with your facility management team, ask them for advice. They are experienced. They can show you the real case scenarios where they've done it before and you may be able to implement it in your community. And of course, there are high-cost strategies, which may not be so popular at the moment, but definitely worth looking at. Upgrade lift equipment. This takes a lot of power, especially if those equipment are old. Look at the window replacement. Look at the sealants. You may have to seal the air gaps. Look at the renewable energy installations. Use automation systems for controlling temperatures, controlling humidity, controlling other parameters of your systems. As I said, it's just a few, but there are many. We're not focusing here on MEP. So I'm going to move on to implementation of digital solution. As manager, you can completely automate and digitalize the system right now. There is nothing really stops you. You can send all the documents to residents electronically. You can send online payment gateway. You can have them via Zoom meeting, right? You can talk to them. You can discuss and you can share documents at the moment. You can do a reservation of the building amenities. Everything can be done online right now. And we really encourage everyone to move that direction. It really cut costs on the back office and admin costs. That will help for sure. If you have your overhead minimized within your company, you will be able to offer more competitive prices to your clients. And of course, you will help to control the cost within the service charge budget. Only pay for what is necessary. We usually identify good costs and bad costs. So try to eliminate those bad costs that are non-essential. Something that you can live without, something that you don't really need to spend money on at the moment. And that is not only about the communities, but that will apply to your companies. It will apply to your personal life as well. So only pay the good costs. Good costs are investments. So look at the cost as an investment. If you get in returns from it, then it's a good cost. If you not, then it's probably a bad cost. So look at the elimination of that. These are the other cost control strategies, and of course, procurement. I touched on procurement earlier, but I would like to give you a few tips on how procurement department may function and help you as a manager to control the cost. Develop vendor strategy for each service and or group of services. You have to have a strategy. Your cost control must be a strategic cost control. Look for suppliers. Spend time on sourcing. That's important. Qualify your suppliers. Do not just grab everyone from the market. Look at what you need. Set up a qualification criteria around this and have everybody qualified. Negotiate prices. Always negotiate prices. There's nothing wrong in negotiation prices. And it's not culture. This is business. Always negotiate. Complete the contract. Try to complete the contract always. Do not try unnecessarily stop the contract because it may actually cost you more money. Try to complete the contract. Supply contract. Track supplier's capability and performance. And tender. And look, even if the supplier supplies spare parts, you still may want to check the market price. So tender first. Of course, there are risks.
Sorry, again, another question. Is there any legal requirement that you check more than one supplier?
Well, there's a good industry practices where you need to have a number of commercial proposals or technical proposals from the market. As directed,
it's not a legal directive.
Well, as directed by RERA to us,
okay. Yeah,
we should have minimum 6 proposals from the market, and that will then maybe checked by the auditor. So we'll say 6 is a minimum. If you want to check for more, that's fine.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, thank you.
So the risks are associated with the procurement. You need to look at really manufacturing capacity of the vendors or supply capacity of your vendors. You need to look at potential delays. If you ship in something like we recently shipped a multi-purpose court equipment from God knows where, and it took us 4 or 5 weeks to just get this stuff in the UAE and then clear the customs. So look at those things. We didn't know that, unfortunately. Otherwise, we would have probably paid more money and get it at the local market. Look at the past performance of your vendors. Look at the manufacturer warranties. So these are the risks that you really need to consider. Another strategy is to switch to output-based contracts. We all know that input-based contracts are very, very defined. It really depends. It really tells you how many cleaners are going to be working. And I'm going down to very basic terms. How many cleaners are going to be working in your community? How many MEP technicians are going to be there? How many security are going to be there? Irrespective of the performance. And that's input-based contracts. So we are now encouraging everyone to move into output-based contracts, is where you set up the performance criteria for your contractor and let contractor to use his internal expertise to achieve that. Yeah, so it's going to be, the contractor would be expected to come up with his own proposal for how to achieve your standards and your performance. And all then you have to do is to measure that performance. And then you can penalize your contractor, you can apply certain measures, control measures to your contractor, and you can actually drive the cost down as well. If you're achieving the performance, you may set up different targets. You may change your standards and you can drive the cost down. So the logic behind the use of output specification is that the client's main concern is not the means by which performance standards are met, but the fact that those performance standards are actually met. Yeah. So contractor should be entitled to use his own expertise. Contractor should be entitled to offer solutions that achieve and exceed our or client's performance requirements. So use it and measure the performance, and measure performance by using SMART KPI criteria. SMART means specific, measurable, applicable, relevant, and timely. So use those criteria, measure performance of every contractor, especially if it's facility management, cleaning, MEP. Use KPI scorecards. I have an example of one KPI scorecard. This is what we use in our organization. It has six categories. It's a general management, there's a business-related category, there's people and personnel-related category, innovation, and technical. We weight each KPI, and then our managers, they look at the performance of every contractor at the end of the period, and then if they score less than 85 or 90, then we apply measures in accordance with the contract that we have with them. So that is very important. Use that. That's very important. So just basic tips, and I'm getting close to the end. Basic tips, again, going down to basics. Number one, communicate in advance with the suppliers for contract renewal to allow enough time to negotiation. Do not wait until the last month, last minute when your contract is expiring and you suddenly decide to tender. You will then not going to do this process well. Start 3 months in advance. Run detailed cost analysis prior to any contract renewal. Look at the costs. Look what can you optimize. Manage your contractors proactively. Stay in touch with them. It's very important to understand what these guys are doing. If you see that your strategies are going to change, inform them. Be proactive. Study your market. Look at the innovation. Look at new companies. Look at the offerings that are new in the market. Plan ahead and always forecast. Always forecast your expenditures. Look at where you're going to be in 12 months, in 24 months, or maybe in 3 years. Depends on your abilities to forecast. Prepare detailed RFPs. Always look at the scope of work. Always tell your contractors what you want from them. Negotiate every quotation. Obtain minimum 6 commercial proposals from the market. We touched on that. Always compare apple to apple. Do not compare apple to banana. If you compare one scope of work, two contractors, use the same scope of work for them. There may be different added values, but try to compare apple to apple. And request discounts. There is nothing wrong in requesting discounts on spare parts, on the on other set of materials that are additional to the contract. And then the conclusion, I guess that would summarize overall strategy that I think every manager, every community manager should use at the moment. There are 5 steps that we set out here. Focus on optimizing rather than just cutting expenses. To ensure that your community business can sustain competitive relevance and maximize its potential. Number 1 is to start with strategy. Please have a strategy. This is very important. Do not make a random decision. And drive this strategy from top to bottom. Align your costs to your strategy. Look across the whole organization. Differentiate strategically critical good costs from the non-essential bad costs. Aim high. Be brave. Be creative. Use technology, innovation, and any other new way of working to optimize the cost. Set direction and show leadership to your contractors, to all the levels of the management. Deliver this cost optimization as a strategic business transformation program. Create a culture of cost optimization in your company, in your organization, among your contractors, among any stakeholders that are involved in community management. Ensure you have a culture of ownership and incentivize continuous improvement. That's it from me.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Karabat. I just wanted to, I noted one of the points that I really liked is to actually have a culture of proactive approach. This is very important, I think, because you need to, you talk about forecast, but you also need to anticipate what your client will need in the future. I think this is one of the, rather than just fight fire, you have to be proactive as a management, as a community management company, and anticipate what could be the next request or the next step, or something that also have your company or have your employees know what is the objective. This is very important again. I think in any kind of organization to get the kind of adoption of every employee within that of your objective. They need to know what is the objective and feel that they are part of it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this very insightful presentation, very detailed presentation. And now I think we will leave the floor for Mr. Hassan, Mr. Waqar Hassan.
Yeah, thank you very much. So Alex talked about the operational cost, and I will be talking about the reserve fund, also called the capital expenditure or the CapEx planning. Can we go to the first slide?
There it is.
So what? Yeah, these are the 5 key points that I'll be talking about. The reserve fund philosophy, the deficiencies and pitfalls that we have in our current approach, what is our role as a manager, and then some of the theory on what the funding models are, and then some questions and examples that we can say. So going to the first one, the reserve fund philosophy. Human nature is inherently to avoid uncertainty. We do not, as human beings and as organizations, we do not like uncertainty. We like to, have some certainty in life, though life has inherent risk. So this is the tricky part where we have to plan and we have to bear some risk. And then also that we need to understand is the high risk, high return thing. Everybody knows that, higher the risk, higher the return. So we have to link these basic principles with our reserve fund and how they are related to each other. Then the next point is that uncertainty leads to higher risk. If you're not certain about something, it gives us higher risk. So when some asset or some property is high risk, its initial price will be low. Nobody wants to pay a high price for something which is risky, because if they pay high price, the return will go down. So if they pay low price initially, the return might go up. So what does reserve fund do is it provides us a cushion against this uncertainty through cash flow management. So we estimate, project, and predict when those big expenditures, replacements or renovations will be coming up, and we can plan accordingly to minimize and manage the risk and uncertainty. I think I've covered this point. Let's go to the next one now. So what are our deficiencies and pitfalls in our current practice? So even though we know that there is a new law and we are still, in the process of getting the new directions. So the old directions which were issued under the previous law are still relevant for us. We can take guidance from there. So reserve fund planning needs to be based on a study, because this is a plan, this is a budget. So we have to base it on some objective evidence, some educated guesses, not just pure guesswork. So it has to be an educated guess based on some empirical evidence, some experience. So we are usually relying on a third-party consultant to do the reserve fund study for us. So I want you to keep the two terms separately: reserve fund budgeting and planning, and the reserve fund study. So the planning and budgeting, the reserve fund study is a tool for that. It is something on which we base our plan and budget. So the reserve fund study, which is a requirement from the previous directions coming in. What we do usually is we rely on a third party. We tell them prepare the reserve fund study for us. There is minimal involvement from the manager, and we get that document and we accept it. It should not be like that. The managers should actively work with the consultants, because the consultants, they can bring their own expertise on the asset lives, replacements, costs, and the life cycle, when it will be replacing. But they do not understand the property as well as the manager. So the manager needs to work with the consultant, telling them about their property and communicating with them. The more sound information will go to the consultant, the better the consultant can then guide the management. Because if garbage will go in, garbage will come out. So good quality information from the manager has to go to the consultant for a good report or good study to come out, which can then be used for the reserve fund planning. One thing that we mostly ignore is the owners, the nature of the owners, the type of the community, what is their risk appetite. Now, if you remember what I talked about in the first slide was that reserve fund is basically a hedging against the risk, the uncertainty of, you know, sudden surprises of big bills. So I think somebody's scribbling on the screen.
It's not me.
Okay. So we need to look at the owner's risk appetite. This will differ from a luxury development to a mid-income development to an economical development, because if one community, there are mostly investors. Investors look at returns. Their objectives for owning that property are different from people who are living in that property. So what characteristics of owners and their preferences are there? How much risk they are willing to take? For example, for one community, a 1,000 dirham expense is a high risk. I'm just giving an example. 1,000 dirham may be something that they need to plan for. For another community, 1,000 dirham may be a petty cash expense. So the characteristics of the owners need to be accounted for and looked at carefully, and then we take decisions on what needs to go into the reserve and how. The other, yes,
Mr. Waqar, I think I have one of the questions that are you know, coming.
Yeah.
Where is the do the owners have a say? And I think this is the right place to ask it. You know, do the owners have a say with the new law, with the removal of the owners association and the board and all of that, in the nitty-gritties and the daily procedures? How can owners actually have a say in this?
That's a very, very interesting question. The owners have, I think, the ultimate say in this. Previously, the owners had the burden of the executive and the administrative duties. When the board was used, the owners were wearing two hats, as customers and as executives. So they were the customers and they were delivering the duties as well. But now the law has segregated. Let the managers execute, administer the property, and owners, their rights are very well protected in the new law, are now in wearing the hat of customers only. They demand, this is what we want. And if they don't like, the procedures are very clear in the new law how they can get rid of the management. Okay. But it really clarifies in the new law, and owners, their rights are very well protected. But again, the segregation of the executive and the customer, it was, I think, very important, because that is where the little, you know, tussle between the board and the management, it's a natural thing which was happening.
But
so
I'm talking
yes.
here about the mechanism of how can we, I'm asking this question to play the devil's advocate, because we get these questions from people. What is the mechanism for, I think we are going to have this later on at the, you know, with the other webinars. But there's a question of how can I have my voice heard? Where do I say that I think this is risky or not risky? Because you're touching on this topic. How can I get my voice through that I want this expense to be spent or not? So that's you know, probably we will have to do, we have to do this with in another webinar.
Yeah, but I'll briefly answer that. This is the job of the managers to understand their customers.
Exactly.
This is a science. So the managers, they need to understand their customers. They need to understand what the customers want. And because in each project, there will be hundreds of customers. So it is the manager's job to manage all those customers' interests and develop a strategy that almost most of them are happy.
Yes.
So that's the science of it, that each manager has to make their own business decision on how they can keep their customers happy and so on.
Yes.
So going back to lack of policies, we have a lot of operational policies in place, but I feel that, myself included, as managers, we do not have very clearly identified policies with regards to capex, with regard to asset replacements and major renovations. So as the market matures, managers should focus and create asset renovation and replacement policies, which are currently lacking in our practice. The other and the last part, which I consider as a deficiency or pitfall, or where managers and all who are involved in the industry need to understand, is that when the reserve fund study is received, it has two huge variable elements. These are the cost and the time of replacement. So when will an asset require to be replaced, and what is the cost of replacement? These two are variables. These two are what the consultant proposes the managers. This information should be used, and a business decision needs to be made that when actually the manager thinks this might be, and then some things that need to be coordinated between other things. When you have task 1, 2, 3, then management has to incorporate the reserve or the capex replacement with other strategy and the overall strategy. So that business decision has to go back to the manager. I think, did I make that point clear, or it confused?
I'm not sure. We're not getting any questions, so
yeah. Okay.
I guess it's
in the end, yeah. But I think this we forgot to tell, that participants can leave their questions in the chat box, and
the chat box, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Next slide. Now coming to the role of the manager. So we do not have to leave the reserve fund study in its entirety to the specialist, because the budgeting is responsibility of the manager. So we utilize the reserve fund study and the reserve fund consultant specialist and prepare the budget. And we need to look at the reserve fund or the capex budget every year. Sometimes what happens is we do a study, come up with a thing, and then we leave it. So every year we'll just pick up that amount for 4 or 5 years, just keep using that. We do not update our reserve replacement plan or the capex plans. So we need to, because we are preparing the budget, we need to do that every year. We need to work closely with the consultant, provide good quality information so that the consultant can provide us good quality feedback, prepare policies and record information. So this is happening that we rely on the MEP or the FM or the maintenance service providers to take care of our assets. They maintain the asset register, they maintain the records, but we rarely would have the same service provider over decades. 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, the service provider may change, but the history of the capital assets, major works, this needs to be properly documented, because this is something we need to use long term. An asset that is being replaced or requiring something 10 years, the proper what is it called, service history. When we go out and sell a car after 5 years, 10 years, the cars with that have the service history, they sell for more because it has a properly documented service history. Same goes with the assets. When we have a properly documented service history over a long period of time, it gives us more comprehensive information on when it's requiring replacement, or when we need to change components, or a lot of big assets they comprise different components, and at times we need to change only one component instead of the whole asset. So having proper record information and policies is also the role of the manager, and we need to not just rely on the FM service provider to maintain the asset register and the history on the major assets. We need to play our role.
If I may just add something, Dubai is relatively speaking, properties and developments are still new. So I think most people don't really appreciate the importance of what you're talking about now, of the taking stock and taking inventory of the age and of the condition of your asset. Let's say elevators, windows, doors, whatever it is, chiller system, I don't know, whatever, ACs, etc. So I think with time, this will become more and more of an important and a crucial point that people will start noticing as buildings start maturing, and as these big costs start becoming, urgent. Also, I think what we used to do with my previous experience on this is that we used to take, as I said, take inventory of all the assets, forecast the time, the life expectancy of every asset, and start budgeting, you know, so that you don't have big. But again, another thing that Mr. Karabet touched on very importantly is the fact that people in Dubai and in our markets, because of this not full understanding, I'm talking here about clients, they are happy with low service charges. They don't really, you know, they don't like it when they have to pay high service charges, and they don't really understand the financial, I think the financial health of a development, you know, when there is quite a good amount in the reserve fund, okay, is a good indication of the, as I said, again, I'm going to repeat it, financial health of the development, and whereby as a buyer, as an investor, I would be happy to, you know, if I know that this development has money for future, for contingencies, for whatever. Yeah. And as a real estate broker, when I was operating again in a different market, it was one of the conditions for purchase. We used to ask to see the financial records and the owners in that market. We had an owners associations who met every year, and we wanted to look at the minutes of the AGMs to see if there were any capital expenditures planned. So and match that with the money that is available. Okay, when we look at the financial statements, to know if my client would like to actually enter into such a community. So this was a deciding factor on whether I would want to buy into that community or not.
Yes.
So it's quite important. I think we are developing. We are, you know, learning as we go.
Yes. So in my experience, for the past decade in this market, never has any buyer asked for financials of the property.
I know.
So, you know, but once
it will come. I think it will come soon.
It is also, yeah. So once people, the customers become aware and they know, you know, that this is the thing that they need to look, then it will be a natural development of the industry. So capital asset replacement and renovation plans are also very important. The management should have plans, because because it is about managing uncertainty and risk. So if you know that if I buy this property and I have to pay 10,000 dirhams for the first 3 years, and then I will have to pay 20,000 dirham in the 4th year, and then, okay, you know it. So you have that plan. So you don't expect surprises. You can price the property looking at that information. So this is in that aspect very important. So let me now just talk about the funding models. And before I go there, let me add one more point which came, you know, which is related to what you said about the funding importance and how the financial health is important. So when we collect the reserve fund, you know, we have inflation. So if we have 1 million dirhams in 1 year, and then there is inflation, so if we are not properly investing that fund, we are actually harming the owners. Yeah. So if there is a 10 million fund and there is 3% reserve, so we'll lose 300,000 dirhams year on year on a 3% or 2% inflation, will lose 200,000 dirhams. So it is important that banks come up with secure investments. There is guidance on that. So because an investor will think, instead of paying that money and losing out on inflation, why not he invest that money? And whenever you need that money, because this is where you need to understand your customer. If the customers are investors and they say, you know, if you need extra money, no problem, we can pay it. We should rather not be paying upfront and lose out on inflation. We will rather pay when you need it. So this is what we need to understand about the risk appetite of the owners as well. So let me look, there is one question. I think we still have, okay. So this is not just, okay, this is a comment only. Let's look at the funding models. in the next slide. So there is baseline funding. So in baseline funding, we estimate, the consultant will tell us that, this asset is expected to, complete its life after 5 years. So after 5 years, you may be spending for this asset at any time. Now there is one more additional point related to this replacement. So there is cost of replacement, and then there is cost of procurement. So let me give you a very simple example of an air conditioner. A normal air conditioner may cost, say, 5,000 dirhams for your home. And you say, I will change this air conditioner after 10 years. It will last for 10 years. So when you have to change that air conditioner, you find out that, the air conditioner that you had previously was maybe single phase, and now the market has 3-phase air conditioners. So when you have to change the air conditioner, you'll have to change the power cables. And the previous air conditioner was, very lightweight, and the new air conditioners in the market, they are very heavy, so you have to change some brackets. And also you have to make some more modifications. And also you find out that the previous guy put that air conditioner during the construction, and now there is no access. So you'll have to call a crane also to get the air conditioner to the top. So that 5,000 air conditioner actually cost 15,000 dirhams with all the modifications and things. So when we are looking at replacement cost management, we need to look at the additional costs. Recently, there was a chiller being replaced in a building in Dubai Marina. So it was not just the cost of the chiller to be replaced. There were permits involved. There was a huge crane involved, like the construction crane, which had to pick up the chiller and take it to the roof. Insurance for that operation. So all that cost is significant. The cranes of that size do not come cheap. So when we are looking at the reserve fund, we need to accommodate for those costs, that it is not just the replacement cost of that asset. There are going to be a lot of other costs associated with the operation of that change, including insurance for that special operation, permits, NOCs from authorities, and the cranes and modifications, all of that. So baseline funding is, you need to keep yourself above zero. You keep your head out of the water. That's it. So if you expect that after 10 years you will be, you have to need 10,000 dirhams, you will plan that you just keep that, meet that first expense, and then again you start contributing and just keep yourself above zero. You do not build a reserve fund as such. You just keep yourself above zero. You don't build a reserve fund over a period of time. You just keep yourself above zero and maintain, contribute what needs to be contributed. This has obviously a high risk. So then there is a very low risk model, fully funded. So you expect the asset life is 10 years, and in 10 years you will need 10,000. So you contribute 1,000 dirham every year. So by the time the asset reaches its life, you have 10,000 dirhams in your savings. This is a fully funded model, least risky, but of course owners have to pay more for getting fully funded. Then there is a threshold model. Now when you have a big property, lots of assets, whatever we predict, everything will not fail at the same time, and everything will not be replaced at what we predict. So there you get the the probability comes in, and the variations come in. So threshold model, what it does is, say for a high-rise building, we establish a threshold of 10 million dirhams. We say if we have 10 million in the dirhams in our as a threshold, we can manage any expense. We can spread out the expense and manage it, and we try to cover that. So there's a threshold model where we set up, based on the size and nature of the property, we set up a minimum threshold and we just achieve that. Anything over and above, the law states that if the reserve fund is not sufficient, then the owners have to contribute, but a threshold will provide a cushion to spread and even out the payments. So that is also practical and workable solution. I think I have just typed threshold twice there. Then there is a high statutory model. Basically, there should be a statutory model. Statutory model is where the regulator says you have to contribute a certain percentage or an amount. So that comes from the regulator. For example, RERA may specify that you have to contribute 3 dirhams per square foot. This is the reserve fund standard, or 1 dirham per square foot.
I think there was a 7% or something like that, or am I imagining?
There were different guidelines at different times coming from RERA, and that is from case to case and property basis. So in some cases, the regulator may put a limit on how much you can, collect as a reserve fund. And then this is what I came up with my own experience is a hybrid model. A hybrid model is that you fund and you estimate the expenses. How you are going to fund it will be determined by the owner's characteristic and preferences. Are they risk averse? Are they less risk averse? They want to contribute slowly, or they're okay to pay big monies. And then you need to build a threshold for these additional expenses. Like I gave example of this crane and modification, these these surprises which it's impossible to predict all of them and have. So you need to have a certain threshold, and then you build on your actual expenses that you think. So it's a combination of a threshold and somewhere between fully funded and baseline. So you can say, funded 50% or 70%, and then have a threshold. Again, ultimately, what determines this is the characteristics of the owners and the needs of the community. And each community manager has to make that business decision, because I'm not recommending use this one or this one, but for some smaller community, a fully funded model may be feasible. But for some bigger communities, it may not be feasible, because whatever money that we collect, then we have to be responsible that we do not just put that money and let it devalue in the bank without being properly invested. So these are the funding models, and I think we've reached our time also. If there are any questions,
I think there are some questions. Yes, there are some questions. Okay, so
there is a comment by Mr. Jeevan. He's saying, thank you for highlighting that how closely managers need to work with the consultants. This greatly improves the quality of the reserve fund study, and ultimately the property and the business decisions then made on that reserve fund study are more valuable. So thank you, Mr. Jeevan, for that comment.
I have a question to Mr. Karabet and Mr. Waqar. Managers play an important part in the building management, including budgeting and providing good services to the client. But at the same time, the manager's role is not quite recognized in the building, and some owners do not treat managers with respect. How can the role be seen as a respectful one? Any advice you can give on how to help managers improve their image? By Ayaki.
This hurts. So
that's why
all managers will agree. So somebody in our industry, they said that we have an identity crisis. So because of the owners association and then the property managers, so a lot of people do not really understand, and even we do not, so we were owners association managers, community managers, property managers, so what strata managers. So we have a bit of this too many names and roles. So if somebody, this is a big challenge for me, if somebody asks what do I do, I have a difficulty explaining it to them what I do. So now it is a bit clear. I say property management, but earlier it was not an easy thing to explain people what we do. And I think it is collectively our responsibility, and Alex, you will agree with me, that we explain to people what we do. The more we explain to people what we do, our profession will be recognized. And once the profession is recognized, we as individuals and the profession both will be respected in the eyes of people.
I think telling by doing is a good thing. I have to say, from the other side,
I think Alex's mic is muted.
Yes, he is muted. I don't know why. I don't know if he's muted himself or the host has muted him. That's why I think very importantly, there's Alex. If I'm a manager and I actually take action, follow through with requests, perform as should be, then this, will gain respect. I think, yeah, I mean, telling people what you do by actually doing it is a good thing.
And I want to share one thing with the you had a question about training and the importance of training the cleaners, and all people involved, they need to be trained and coached.
Exactly.
So I'll give you an example of why it is so important. We had to put a notice in one elevators. This happened personally with me. So the notice was in a landscape mode, so it was written horizontally. So the building supervisor, he passed it on to the cleaner to put it in the elevator. The cleaner was not literate, so what he did was he put that landscape in a portrait.
Yes.
And immediately somebody sent me a picture from that building.
Complaint. Yes.
We have to tilt our heads to read this notice. So this is a real problem. How communication reaching customers, eventually it tilted. So we need to train and coach people all the time.
See, I think personally, I think taking ownership is very important, and that's why when when you have a culture of this is mine, this belongs to me, I need to make it. So this watchman or manager or whoever gave the illiterate, it is on him. I think.
Yeah.
He should not have given it to somebody who is, or at least he should have told him how to put it. I mean, these are things that people do automatically without small things. They are very small things, tiny things, but they can be. You can have an irate client who is very picky and who makes this the end of the world. So it's and when you deal with people, when it's a service industry, on top of the technicalities you have to go through. Yes, I can understand the challenge.
The aesthetics and cosmetics, the perception of the service is very important, because if people will see, this company cannot put up a straight notice, how we can trust them with doing that. And with this, it is very important to, take every mistake and every incident like this as a learning opportunity, and let people make mistakes and then guide them, own the mistakes. So, everybody learns from those mistakes.
Very true.
We've got a beautiful audience. No questions.
Yes, I think we have quite a. Maybe Mr. Karabet would like to add something.
Just a simple thing. I guess communication is the key. We have to explain what we do, how we do it, what challenges we face. Because if you have 10 owners in front of you, there are high chances that you're gonna listen to 10 different opinions on what you do and how you do it, or whether you do it good or bad, and so on. So, but communication is the key. We have to use all the methods to explain where we are as community managers, as community management companies, what challenges we face every day, dealing with contractors, dealing with the government, dealing with clients as well. When we explain that, and if we are heard, then the opinions will change, I'm sure.
Yes, definitely. Another question I have is, owners board must be educated about the importance of RF in order to discharge their duties. Okay, by Ruka. This is an important one. Financial statements are accessible through the Mullak system. This is by Hiba Jabir, my colleague. And accessible to all owners. Is that correct? When we spoke about the financial statements.
But again, owners going to Mullak and using, because it is ultimately the owners. If the owners don't want to see the financial statements, we can't force them to see them.
Yes. Oh no, of course.
But even if owners ask for financial statements, they can go to Mullak or ask the managers. But they don't ask.
They don't ask. No, they don't ask because they don't realize and they don't recognize the importance. Again, very importantly is the fact that properties still do not require a lot of maintenance. I mean, they do, some of them of course do, but relatively speaking, we don't have like 50-year-old properties that are falling down, like still
but
we
are.
Yes.
Surprisingly, well, maybe not surprisingly, but there are not many people who can actually read financial statements.
Yes, of course.
Who can actually read the audit reports, and there are some people who think they actually know something about it. When you send it to them, you see no questions.
Yes,
it's most probably because they just cannot read them properly.
I think this is where the role of the brokerage companies and the real estate agents I think they can play a role in guiding the investors on, because they give advice to investors on which property to buy or not to buy. So if they look at the financial health of a property, then they can, slowly educate the end users as well.
Yeah.
Another question, do all reserve funds have to be kept liquid funds so that they can be drawn down as and when required? I think you answered that and said you can, it might be a good idea to reinvest them somewhere in order to...
We have to wait for directions from the land department, because everywhere in the world there are strict criteria on how reserve funds can be invested. You don't want that you put them in some risky investments and you lose them. So land department will have some guidance coming up about how to invest reserve funds.
Correct. Okay, and the last question: who has the end responsibility, basically, for the maintenance and management of the common areas?
As per the new law, it is the management companies.
It is the management companies. Yes.
Yeah,
I think
owners pay for it.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's important that there are multiple layers of the responsibilities involved. If you look at, for example, fire alarm and firefighting equipment, there are companies that enter into agreement with Dubai Civil Defense for every building. So they are party to that need to make sure that the systems are fully functioning. However, management carries the responsibility for the administration, for the financing, for timely payments to those contractors, to taking decisions on when this has to be done and how. So there are multiple layers. And when it comes to cleaning or MEP, it's a little bit different, but it's case by case.
Okay, then I think we are out of time. We've actually exceeded by 12 minutes. There are other questions. Of course, this is a huge topic, and I'm sure there are so many people interested in it from different angles. We will probably have some more webinars and talks about this in the future. Stay tuned. I thank you very much, Mr. Hassan and Mr. Karabat, for this very insightful and informative session. It was quite interesting, very full, a lot of information. It was mostly, it was more of a course than a webinar. So, thank you very much. And thank you everybody who joined us and who participated in the questions.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Yes. See you soon.
Thank you, Taro. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.